Let me just ask you a question. It's a detail here, but Ernie, my producer, always sends me things that then lead to great things. So I'm going to pass on his question. Knowing that his wife Ginny is so deeply tied to the
Oh,
insurrection, is there anything that can be done about Clarence Thomas when it comes to the cases the court hears about January 6th, to which he's not only related, but his wife is should be actually, as part, she should be prosecuted, I think, in terms of her own role in that.
yeah. I mean, the so for people who don't know a little, let's just do a little background on Ginni Thomas. She has really deep ties to the Crusader Network, including this group called the Council for National Policy, which is this sort of shadowy, really powerful organization that most people have never heard of. The Heritage Foundation, including others that are litigating these cases before the Supreme Court. She wrote. There's a listserv that Justice Thomas and all of his clerks and Ginni Thomas are on this email list, and on the eve of January 6th, you have them exchanging these messages on there that they're praying on their knees that January 6th will see the truth and, shine a light on people's hearts about the stolen election. John Eastman, that name should ring a bell for some people. He's the legal architect behind the insurrection on January 6th, right? He is kind of involved. He was on that listserv. He's a former
And by
Thomas
the way,
clerk.
helped a little bit by Mike Johnson, the current Speaker of the
Oh
House.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and so Ginny has these ties, and has created these organizations. We know Leonard Leo has funneled her money and tried to keep it quiet. There's all these damning revelation after damning revelation coming out to the point where it is clear that Clarence Thomas should really not be sitting on pretty much any case that involves January 6th or involves a lot of these organizations that are submitting briefs on the other side. The problem that we face is that this Supreme Court regulates itself. There's no binding ethics code on this Supreme Court that prevents them from doing things. And I often talk about solutions to a captured court. What can we do now that the Supreme Court has been packed and captured? And an ethics code is one of them, a binding ethics code with some teeth. But one of the questions I often get asked, which I think we're kind of alluding to a little bit here, is, well, let's impeach Clarence Thomas. And I two things to say about this. One is, I think we found out during the Trump era that impeachment is not a realistic check on political power. It made sense when we were drafting the Constitution. As an idea, it seems to work, but it is not an effective check at all. And we have seen the amount of money and political capital that the other side is willing to spend to capture the court. I mean, think back to the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation, to put Brett Kavanaugh on the court, to jam Amy Coney Barrett onto the court, even though millions of Americans have already voted in the election. And that was supposedly why we couldn't allow Barack Obama's nominee to even have a hearing, right? When McConnell stopped Merrick Garland from even getting a hearing, and then eventually put Neil Gorsuch on the case, right? Like on the court, excuse me. There is, if they are willing to spend that kind of political capital and that kind of money to pack the court, there's zero chance that they are going to vote to.
And you talk about the need to expand the court somehow, as in to dilute this thing. Go there a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is absolutely one of the solutions. I think that having a binding ethics code is super important. I think that having term limits is a really interesting solution. I think that is constitutionally problematic, given the language in the Constitution and the people who interpret the language of the Constitution, namely the justices on the Supreme Court. But we know, and it is clear, that the number of justices on the Supreme Court is set by Congress. Congress can change the number of justices on the Supreme Court at any time. On average, we've done that once every 30 or so years throughout American history. Mitch McConnell changed the size of the Supreme Court when it suited his political ends, right? We just talked about it. Blocking Merrick Garland, he knocked the size of the Supreme Court down to 8 for almost a year and a half, and then put it back up to 9 when it suited his political ends. It's very, very common for this to happen. And I think that when an outside organization or a group network of organizations spends $500 million to capture one branch of our government, that is not something we can allow to stand.